Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Please take your seats. I hope you had a wonderful time exploring the exhibition and also enjoying lunch, and you're all fresh for the afternoon session. Maybe some of you who are outside of the hall and want to be inside, come in. You can take your cups with you, that's not a problem. The afternoon program will offer us insights to European Research Council and Maria Sklodowska-Curie actions and their financial support to scientists. Czech grantees will share their experience and later also their views on possible future scenarios in panel discussions. And on the 20th Czech Days for European Research, the afternoon session will be opened by Maria Leptin, the president of the European Research Council. She will wrap more than 15 years of ERC and the impact they had on research in Europe.
Hello, I'm honored to open the session on the ERC today, and I thank Minister Radka Vildova for the invitation. And I'm really sorry I'm not there in person. I would love to be in Prague with you. Some ERC grantees will soon talk about their research that is funded by the ERC, and this is surely the best way to understand what the ERC is about, to hear them as ambassadors. But let me also say a few words about the ERC. First, I'm really happy to have one of your academics as a colleague on the Scientific Council, Alice Valkarova. And Czechia can be really proud that one of yours, namely Pavel Axner, was a founding member of the Scientific Council and indeed one of the first vice presidents. We've also had Tomáš on the council. Since its creation 16 years ago, the ERC has funded 12,000 grantees and trained 80,000 young researchers in their lab. They were resident in about 900 institutions in the entire European research area. And according to studies, 80% of ERC-funded projects have delivered scientific breakthroughs or significant scientific advances. And since its inception, 12 ERC grantees have subsequently been awarded Nobel Prizes. Of course, also something to be very proud of. However, this does not mean that only Nobel Prize candidates can or should apply to the ERC. In fact, several Nobel Prize winners have failed to win an ERC grant, at least in the first round, because their project proposals were simply not deemed competitive with the other best proposals in those calls. So that's the message that I want to give to you. What counts in our evaluations is really the research idea and the quality of the proposal, much more so than the achievements of the researcher, or above all, not the reputation of the researcher or of their host institution. Now, we all know that in several European countries, researchers have lower success rates than average in ERC calls. There's probably a number of structural factors why applications from these countries may be, on average, of less high quality. We clearly see a correlation with lower national investment in R&D, with limited career opportunities in such countries, lack of independent peer reviews systems, and some others. However, I'm aware that in Czechia, the government and the universities are doing a really great job with programs to support ERC applicants and researchers in general, and the good results are already visible. There have been so far 54 ERC grants in Czechia, 8 of them under the current framework program Horizon Europe, and 2 ERC synergy grants. The success rate of researchers from Czechia has improved from Framework Program 7 to Horizon 2020, and we're expecting it to go up further in the current Framework Program, especially for the starting and consolidated grants. So from our side, of course, we also do what we can to help, and the ERC has programs to support and mentor applicants from Czechia, which include the Visiting Fellowship Program for people to spend time in ERC labs, and the mentoring initiative specifically for people who would like to apply for grants. But like I said, for a country to do well in ERC calls, the most important condition is the political will to support frontier research and to create the right conditions for applicants at home. I'm happy to engage in a dialogue with policymakers in all European countries who want to improve their participation in the ERC and to discuss possible ways to support fundamental research. And our knowledge is, of course, also based on the experience of other countries that have gone that way in the European research area. But for the moment, I'm really wishing you the very best with this brilliant funding program that you have and you're about to reinstate, which I will be happy to cite in turn as an example to other countries. I really think it's trendsetting. So I hope you'll enjoy listening to the wonderful grantees you'll be hearing, and that their example will be an inspiration for all young researchers in this country. Thank you.
So that was Maria Leptin, the president of the European Research Council. I would like to remind you that you still can use the ELITR, the translating system that automatically transcribes and simultaneously translates into 42 languages, which screen you can just see it here. And I believe I told you in the beginning, but let me remind it again. There is the QR code through which you can access the page, or you can go on the Czeder homepage and scroll down and you will find it there too. But now we have an exciting program ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you 4 brilliant scientists, the ERC grantees. They're just seated here. As the first one is Tomáš Zedníček. Maybe some of you know that it should have been Michal Otěpka, but he apologized and couldn't make it here, but we have Tomáš Zedníček on his place. And just shortly, Tomáš Zedníček works at the Department Carbon Nanostructures, Biomicromolecules and Simulation in Kateřina, and he is a colleague of Michal Otěpka, and they work together on the ERC grant, respectively on the follow-up grant. So he will talk about it later. Then we have Michal Frankl from Masaryk Institute and Archives of the Czech Academy of Sciences, who is a historian, and he received the ERC Consolidator Grant for a project called Unlikely Refugees and Citizens in East Central Europe in the 20th century, which investigates the continuities and ruptures in refugee reception. Kateřina Sam, our lady in the panel, she is a biologist from the Biology Center of the Czech Academy of Sciences. She received the ERC starting grant, nicknamed BABE, that has an interesting question in the title, Why is the World Green? And she currently focuses on the interactions between plants, their herbivores, and trophic cascades all around the world. And last but not least, Matyáš Fendrych from the Charles University is a plant biologist, and his lab focuses on understanding the molecular and physiological mechanism that control the growth of plant organs and cells. He was awarded an ERC starting grant to investigate the mechanism of auxin's effect on plant roots. So let us start with Tomáš Zedníček.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. At first, greetings from Professor Otěpka, who unfortunately fell down by some illness this morning, but it's my honor to have the talk on his behalf. At first, let me introduce Kateřina, Czech Advanced Technology Center in Olomouc. It is part of nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, and biomedicine. And the research scope is in nanomaterials, nanotechnologies, synthesis and characterization of new materials, carbon, metals, thin layers, but also a focus on simulation, computation, modeling, and its application in various environments, in the sensing, electrical energy storage. The main subject of ERC and other projects were the discovery of the process that create a new form of graphene by fluorographene process. It was discovered in 2010 in Olomouc, and then with step by step it was established the new routes how to make this process stable. Then in 2016 it was supported by ERC that finished in 2020, and the result was the unique graphene material with very high content of nitrogen that support very high energy storage of such materials. But the fluorographene derivatives can be used for many applications, not only for storage like supercapacitors, but also batteries, but also for a number of sensors in environment monitoring. But the main focus for us at the moment was to gain the benefits in electrical energy storage systems. There are again more application. One of this was to improvement in lithium-sulfur batteries, where we currently move the project to a proof of concept in ERC with a target to develop more stable batteries with more charging, discharging cycles compared to what is currently available on the market. But the main focus for us now is towards supercapacitors and use of this graphene material for electrode material for supercapacitors. I will mention this later. And also the side product is graphene acid material, which can be used in various applications for sensors and biosensors and similar applications. But if we focus on these high energy density supercapacitors, with this material, which is unique in high concentration of nitrogen, with this process, we achieve around 17% of concentration of nitrogen in the 2D graphene structure. This has not been achieved by any other processes so far. And the nitrogen works as an activation center for charge. And by this, we can achieve much higher energy density and storage capability of such capacitors. So you can see on the chart what we achieved on the red circle is a potential for this n-dope 2D graphene that actually increase the capability of capacitors up to 5 times compared to what currently present on the market. So with the storage capability, we are very close to nickel metal hybrid batteries, but with much higher power density. It means that the current available is much higher compared to batteries. A key advantage of capacitors is there is no degradation with charging and discharging cycles. So it's very stable without any limitation of charging and discharging. Okay. So as a next steps, there are 2 directions. One of this is what is currently in our main focus is EIC transition that started in autumn. So based on the research of result of the proof of concept in ERC, we had the material ready for capacitors. And now in this EIC, we are working with partners, with industry partners in Italy and Israel to make the prototype of the capacitors that will be ready with all the processes for mass production. And a second direction is proof of concept for lithium sulfate batteries that has a number of advantages compared to currently used lithium-ion batteries. It's lighter, higher energy density, no heavy metals, So it's again helping the supply chain, but the main limitation is there is a very limited number of charging and discharging cycles. And our first experiments showing that there is a significant improvement if we use such material for batteries. Okay, so that's the end of my talk. Is acknowledgement also to support from European Commission and a number of colleagues. And there were a number of publications also in impacted magazines around the research. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Michal Frankl, again, the Masaryk Institute and Archives of the Czech Academy of Sciences. And I'm here to talk very briefly about my ERC Consolidator project that is devoted to refugee history in East Central Europe in the 20th century. Since humanities are different, my talk will be also slightly different, and I would like to reflect a little bit more on what brought me in the first place to propose something like that, and also to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges, although not that much. So the beginning of my thinking about this particular project was something like that. There is a row of books, a lot of publications that dealt with refugee history and critically probed why refugees in the 20th century were not accepted under certain situations on certain borders in certain countries. And I started to look at this from within the Holocaust history, which generated a lot of new research, especially in the 1990s. And I realized very soon that most of these studies are focused on what we would vaguely call the West or liberal democracies, as if refugee protection was a function of a democracy, liberal democracy, or the West in whatever way. And I know this is slightly simplified, but it brought me to think about what would it actually mean to rethink East or non-West or East Central Europe as a place of refuge. So the ERC project that I've proposed and that I have the privilege to lead tries to reconceptualize East Central Europe as a place of refuge, and that means that we're looking at our region as a place, not only a place to live. There's been a lot of refugees who escaped from this region, but also as a place where people seek protection. We try to see what it means for societies, for states, to negotiate refugeedom and what protection actually means. And we believe that by doing that, we not only enrich the history of East Central Europe, that in our case is Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Austria, Hungary, and then the successor states in the whole 20th century. So we do not only relate to this particular region, but also help to think globally beyond the West. So to enrich research about refugee history beyond the West. Now, in the project, I'm not going to talk that much about the details, but we're trying to study refugeedom from below, looking at humanitarianism locally. We're trying to look at histories of citizenship, refugees and citizenship, and we use space and spatial studies as a shortcut to microhistories of refugeedom. So the project started in 2019. I had the privilege to gather a very capable interdisciplinary team, mostly historians, but we also have an anthropologist, and we're very different, and it's an international team. We started in a very welcoming environment of the Masaryk Institute, but also an environment where there was no experience, not only with an ERC project, but with an Horizon 2020 project as such. So that obviously was a very interesting experience. And as we started September 2019, we managed to have 4 in-person meetings, which we used for team building. We've never saw each other before the project started, really. So there was a lot of team building and methodological discussion, and then COVID-19 started. Most of the next 2 years of our project looked like that, and we all know that. And it is a challenge because this was precisely the time when we were supposed to do the research on site. On site for historians means in archives. We cannot retreat to a laboratory. We need to go to the archives, so that we needed to navigate around the lack of access, around the lockdowns, and it was rather difficult. We had to bring in a lot of ad hoc solutions, rescheduling, and obviously we want to ask for an extension of the grant. Now, this is a very simple slide because I don't want to overwhelm you. In terms of results, the project started by conducting a state-of-the-art analysis about what actually has been written about histories of refugees in East Central Europe. We try to not only to pinpoint some gaps, but really make the case why a reversal of perspective is needed, and that has been published very recently. We're working on 2 volumes, one that will be devoted to humanitarianism in East Central Europe. So we want to see humanitarianism not only as a result of well-meant Western efforts, but rather that's something that starts locally. And we're working on our joint volume, which hopefully will also be a big contribution to this area. If I should perhaps pinpoint some topics where I see where I expect real impact, that would be, apart from what I already said, that would be our research cluster on Cold War refugees, in which we are trying to integrate the study of refugees who escaped to the West with research on those who went in the unexpected direction or unlikely direction, if you want, and that is to the east, to state socialist countries. We also have we're building a research cluster on the 1990s period and try to see how refugee regimes were constructed in post-communist countries in East Central Europe, something that we believe should have a lot of impact. What is on my mind is, because the project will inevitably near its end in the next 2 years, so what is very much on my mind is how to keep this effort going and how to make sure that this research group, in a way or partially, the network that we have built continues beyond the ERC. And we're also eyeing a proof of concept project, which is not necessarily easy for historians to contrast. But of course, it's a project that started in the period when the word refugee was almost prohibited, post-2015, and will be finishing in a completely different environment in which exactly this region became a place for refugee reception. And obviously, both of these cases, the 2015 refusal and then the 2022 acceptance of refugees, have a lot of in common. And I think that as a project, without being political, but as a project, we can contribute to our thinking, reflecting on these events. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kateřina. I came from České Budějovice, from the Biology Center, from the Entomology Institute. And despite my project focuses on the role of predators in the study system, we focus on what damages the insect is causing to our forest and to our nature. So as my title of the project implies, we focus on how important are the predators for our nature and for the functioning of the food webs. What is this one? Yeah. So as you might know, we have got various types of the predators, birds, bats, predatory insect, which are feeding on the insect. And when the insect disappears from the nature, the plants grow much more. This is the hypothesis, which is saying why we have the word green. And the hypothesis is that when these predators disappear from the nature, the insect will become a huge pest. They will grow too much, and they will eat all our forests and everything green around us. This is why is the word green hypothesis. And this is actually happening in our surroundings. The insectivorous predators are very sensitive. When we log our forests, they are the first to disappear from nature. So this is what we were trying to mimic in our project. And we were analyzing how the top-down control from the predators affects the smaller predators like spiders, what are the interactions, and how important they are where. And these ideas were already in place when I submitted my project. But unfortunately, all the scientists so far were walking on the ground in the forest understories. This is where the stems of the forest are. There's not too much of the foliage. All the foliage is up there above our heads. And we didn't know anything about that environment. Also, there was a problem how to access it. So I started to not build a network, just try to put together the people who own the cranes around the globe. And these cranes I used to access the forest canopies. So in my ERC project, we made so-called a crane consortium. I located 6 cranes, which I proposed to use. These were located in Japan, China, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and 2 cranes in Australia. Then the changes appeared. Crane in Malaysia got totally rusty, became not safe for us anymore. Then the COVID hit, so we had to find the new cranes. We ended up working in Leipzig in Germany, but this is how the life goes. So in our project, we were excluding the predators. We just got rid of them from the forest. And we did it in the standardized way, so we were excluding ants by various sticky barriers, so the ants can't get in. We were excluding birds and bats separately. This is by building the cages around the saplings and the branches, and we were opening the nettings around so the bats can go in or bats can go in to distinguish what is their respective role and how they interact. And because there is a vegetation season, the plants grow, we were keeping this experiment running for a year at each of the study sites. So this is how it looked like, very beautiful. In the morning, we were opening the cages. In the afternoon, we were closing the cages. And for a year, we were following on what is happening with the insect communities and what is happening in the plants in our predator-protected tiny habitats. The tiny habitats are actually like those individual branches. We have got about 200 of them in the canopies at each of the study sites and 600 smaller saplings in the forest understory. And over the project, we filled in our many freezers with the insects, which we collected and brought back to Czech Republic. And last year summer, we finished the last field season in Leipzig. And now we have everything identified, and we are running the final modelations and simulations on what will happen. As I said, we also focused on the plants itself, on how they change chemically when they don't have the help from the predators. So we collected leaves, and we calculated how much they are eaten when the predators are gone from the study system. And we found quite interesting results. We hope to publish them soon. Some of them are submitted in quite high journals, but I don't want to talk about this now. I can only say that we found the sites where the herbivory damage and the biomass disappearance changed 5 times more. So these study sites were completely trashed and eaten by the insect when the predators disappeared. Some study sites were eaten by 10% more. So quite interesting patterns are appearing. But the whole project was very logistically demanding, as you might hear or expect, because we were working in 6 countries for a full year, and we have got the teams which were changing there for 4-month rotations, and the manipulations of the predators were pretty tricky. Some of the cranes were not very helpful, because they have got special requirements on what time we can go up, what time we can't. Wind was blowing too much. The crane is moving with you 4 meters here and 4 meters there, so we are just flying above what you try to survey. So it was fun, and in the middle of this, when I have got 8 students in China, the COVID came. So I actually, during the project, practiced a lot of management skills, where we ended up with a project and the treatments hanging on the trees. And I needed to communicate everything online with those locals, assistants, and trying to get the samples back to Czech. With the help of WhatsApp, being permanently online, navigating them through the forest. Yes, find this tree, collect this and this way, and send it back to Czech. So fortunately, everything worked out for us. Despite the COVID, we finished on time. Only 1 study site was changed. And actually, during the project, there was the biggest challenge for me was the group of the students which I needed to be on site. So if I can give some advice, don't take 10 PhD students. It's too many. But plan the ERC project a bit smaller than this. And another challenges which I was not ready for was the amount of the data which I collected. Of course, I expected that, but the reality became much worse than this. So we needed to collaborate with another groups of people who had developed a Toucher grant and help us to organize the data to make it useful for our projects to keep it in order. So this was all quite challenging for us, and with this last slide, how it looks like in the field, I would like to thank you for attention. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I wasn't so sure what I should speak about, so I decided to make a little overview how I got to my ERC project, then just very briefly say what we are interested in, and then I just pinpoint a few things where I think this country has a problem with training people to be able to receive ERC grants, because I hope there would be the ERC president here. Because of that, I didn't want to speak about difficulties in working on an ERC project in Czechia, because that wouldn't be that strategic. One funny thing is, in your blue books, my name is written as Martin Fendrych, but it's not me. That's my more famous father. So I'm Matyáš Fendrych. I find that really, really funny.
So, I'm a plant biologist. I work with plants and I'm interested in plants, and in particular, I work with roots. Or so far, I have been working mainly with roots. And roots are the hidden half of the plant body, which we sometimes use the term root blindness. People don't know them, people don't appreciate them, but roots are really important, and without roots, there would be no plants, most of them. So, I did my PhD in Prague here, in the Institute of Experimental Botanics of Academy of Sciences in Prague, and during the time I was focusing on plants, and I was looking at their cellular skeleton, which is called cytoskeleton. I was studying how cells divide, how do they basically do it, and I was also looking how cells secrete material out of their inside to the outside. So a lot of microscopy, a lot of understanding of mechanics of how things work on the lowest level of the plant. Then for a postdoc, I decided to leave Czechia and I went to this amazing city of Ghent in Belgium, and I joined a great institute called PSB department of the VIB, which is kind of a mecca for plant experimental research, at least in this part of the world. And I changed the focus, and I was starting to look at the role of death, of dying, and in particular the programmed cell death in plant development. So how is the programmed dying of cells important for proper building of the plant body? And you can see on the picture, this is a collage of cells in the root which die. These are the yellow cells, and by dying they make space and they keep a proper balance between living and dying cells in the plant body, which was kind of a new concept, and we published that in a paper. We also kind of established a new model system for cell death. But I didn't want to work on cell death. It was kind of depressing. So because I wanted to keep on science, so I decided to change again a bit the direction, and I joined the laboratory of Jiří Frimmel in Austria, in Klosterneuburg, which is a center of that's where the Institute of Science and Technology is based. And it's a great institute full of different scientists from different fields. And I was studying several things. Originally, I was studying something else, but then I moved to the hormone auxin and its effect on the enlargement of cells. And I hope the movie will run. It's running, yes. So this is a root of Arabidopsis, which is a model plant. So this is the root, which is being washed with a plant hormone. And that's when the picture gets pink. And you can see when it gets pink, the root very quickly stops, and when it gets washed away, it starts again. So it's a very simple experimental setup, but when we quantify these effects, we could see that there is something unexpected happening. And I realized that what we believed to be true wasn't the truth. So I kind of find a new effect of a known auxin receptor. So this brought a lot of questions, more questions than answers, these papers which I published there. And I was particularly showing here to you the name of my papers to demonstrate that during these different stages of my career, somehow I managed to publish papers in different groups, which actually I think was the reason why I was able to apply for an ERC starting grant later on. So when I made this finding of this, let's say, surprising effect of this phytohormone auxin, I decided that I will move on again and I will establish my own group, and I decided to write this grant. And now just very briefly, I try to make it very simple. Why does this matter? Why the hormone auxin matter? First, I told you that I study roots, and roots have to be able to navigate in dark soil environment. They have to know where is up, where is down, and this is what we call gravitropism, so the ability to follow gravity. And this is crucial for their adaptation to the environment. That's how they find water, that's how they find where is up and where is down. And this phytohormone auxin is somehow participating in this process, and it's enabling the roots to bend in the correct direction. Second, here I just show a picture of our model organism. This is the model plant Arabidopsis, and next to it there is a match. It's a very tiny plant, and if you zoom in into the root, this is the root tip, and you can see these individual blocks. These are individual cells, and these cells are constantly dividing and constantly growing. And what is fascinating about plants is that they are really different than us animals, because when you are an embryo, cells in your body will move around, they will find their new positions, and that's how you get formed. In plants, this is not happening. The cells stay at their place, and the tight control of division and growth is what makes them, what makes the bodies function properly. So growth is a fundamental feature of development, and that's why it's very important to study it. And what I want to find, or when I started the grant in 2019, the aim was that I want to use this, this phytohormone auxin and its effect on root growth to find the core mechanisms which regulate the ability of the plant cell to regulate its growth. And the idea was to combine special microscopy with, let's say, dynamic measurements of cellular processes with some ways how to discover new proteins that participate in the growth regulation in plants. So we are working on this. In some ways we were successful, in some ways we were successful less. But for sure, thanks to this ERC starting grant, I could try, I could do stuff. Without it, I think it would be very hard. Simply surviving in this city with a family would be very hard without an ERC starter. So when I got the funding, I was able to build both the hardware I needed. So on the picture, you can see a specific vertically oriented microscope with a spinning disc setup. I could build a research team, which is quite international, and it's already slowly changing, but this was also only possible thanks to the ERC. And then when I had this together, we were starting to be able to, also in my newly established lab, to be able to visualize what is happening with the roots in real time. So on the upper picture, you can see how the root influences its environment by acidifying and alkalinizing the rhizosphere. And in the bottom picture, you can see a very rapid reaction of the root to an addition of a stimulus. And you can see that the root is able to react in seconds to what you, when you challenge it with something. We also started to publish our work. In my field, or maybe it's because of me, but it takes some time. You need to generate the material, you need to do the experiments, and it's quite tedious. But we are starting to get papers, and we start to get collaborations. And again, this wouldn't be totally possible without the ERC starter. So we are working on it. Some things work better, something works good, worse. So that's to my project. And then I just made 2 slides, where I heard that in the morning there was a talk how great we are doing here with ERCs and Horizon 2020 in this country. And I prepared 2 slides. Why is Czechia doing so bad at acquiring ERCs? Because I think that's actually the case. And these are just my feelings, which are probably related to my research field, to the small university where, it's not a small university. It's a small department where I'm working. So don't take it as some kind of analysis, it's just my feeling. I think one big problem is this massive inbreeding which we have in this country. So I realized that there is a very low mobility of students and people, but not only between countries, but also between research groups. So some students go to their bachelor and they stay there for the master and PhD, and some even stay forever. Not all, but it's quite common in my field. And then basically they know the system from their mentors. And the mentors very often, for example, don't know what is ERC. So this little congratulations to your JRC, that was one of the professors of our faculty told me when they heard that I got an ERC, they told me, congratulations to your JRC. I said, thank you very much. And it's like an anecdote, but it's true. So I think people don't know ERC, some of the people. And second thing, I think the problem is the Czech environment. So we have Czech group leaders. There is the Czech Spots initiative, which is trying to get Czech back, right? But why do we want to get Czechs? We don't want Czechs. We want anyone, because if somebody wants to be mobile and they can go to a lab which is run by a foreigner, it's much more enriching than another Czech. And I think also, I realized it when I was hired, that it's much more convenient for the faculty to hire a Czech, because the Czech he knows the system and he will adapt to it, right? He will not be so annoying like maybe some foreigner which could be there. So it's more inbreeding by this. And I think they are really great people with great ideas, much smarter than me, with better ideas than me, but they don't even consider applying for ERCs, or they don't fulfill the criteria, because they have been in the lab forever, so they don't have papers without their PhD supervisor. So I think this is a big issue, I'm not sure whether it's changing or not. And second issue, I think the Czechia has quite a comfortable ecosystem, kind of a bizarre but comfortable ecosystem. So there is these gotcha grants, and I think the good groups keep getting their gotchas. So I see that, the good groups, they keep getting the same people the gotchas and again and again and again. And it's quite a short granting cycle of 3 years. So you have to be able after 3 years to get a paper, otherwise you get a black point. So in reality, it works that people actually write their grants on what they already have, or they are pushed to publish very quickly. So it's basically a low risk, low ambition system. And also it requires quite a good orientation in the system. When you come from the outside, you don't really know how it works. And for example, in this gotcha, there is not, maybe I'm wrong, but I think there is not a maximum amount of money you can ask for. And when I asked for that, what is the maximum? They told me that it's not said there because people would ask for the maximum. We don't want that, right? So there are these implicit rules, and when you are not an insider, you are lost in that, which is, I think, also, again, increasing the inbreeding. And second, I think there is a weird mindset, and I hope there is somebody here from the Ministry of Education, because I had now this great opportunity to participate in this operational program, YAK, which is absolutely insane. So it's like the whole country was writing operational program, and there is almost no science in the application. It has 100 pages, and there is like 20 pages of science. People spend a lot of time on that, and there are bizarre criteria. For example, how much papers you will publish in the future. So you have to write how many papers you will publish in the future, and based on this, you will be evaluated. We had huge arguments because some people said, I don't want to promise so many papers. And then other people said, but yeah, if you don't promise, you will not get it. But the problem is if you promise and don't make these papers, you will be punished, right? So then one very, very, very respected professor said, look, in the past, we promised a lot. That's why we got it. And then we had to make a lot of papers, even though the quality was not very high of them. So, it's crazy. I think this is crazy. And I think this is really leading to quantity and not quality. It's not leading to risk. But also, I also applied for this grant, right? Because it's a lot of money. And you don't really dare not applying. And you waste your time and mental capacity for that. And I think even worse is that you kind of train the students that this is normal, right? This is normal, and this is how it should be. And I think this is bad. And that is all what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for sharing your experience with ERCs and to some extent even your scientific journeys. And I believe we will touch many of those topics that Matyáš Fendrych just mentioned in the following panel discussion, because it kind of spins around the topic, how can the Czech Republic become more successful in ERC competitions? Ms. Sam, Mr. Frankl, and Mr. Zedníček will stay as panelists with us, and 2 other gentlemen will join us. So, thank you, Matyáš Fendrych. And please welcome on stage Zdeněk Strakoš and Pavel Tomančák. Just a short introduction for both of them. Zdeněk Strakoš is a coordinator of the Czech expert group to support ERC applicants from Charles University, and Pavel Tomančák is a member of a Czech expert group to support ERC applicants from Czech. But both of them are fine scientists as well. Zdeněk Strakoš is an awarded mathematician interested mainly in numerical and computation mathematics. And Pavel Tomančák is a top evolutionary and developmental biology expert who works at the Max Planck Institute. Have you found your seats? Good. Now we will have to share the microphones between all of us. That might be slightly logistically uneasy, let's say. But when you want to speak, you always just point the microphone into your direction. And I think we can share one, right? Fine, so the topic is set. How can the Czech Republic become more successful in ERC competition? And I would like to start with very warm-up question for the ERC grantees. What did you find attractive of the ERC grants that you applied for? And please sum it up in 2 words.
I can start. So, in 2 words, those are not the words, science and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Trust and takeoff.
The big idea.
Yeah, money and freedom.
All right, thank you very much. We got already some questions from Slido, so maybe we can start with those. Let me find which one would be the good one to start with. Why did you decide for ERC grant and not other national grants or international grants? And how much time did it take you to write and prepare the proposal? Kateřina, could you start?
Yeah, I think I can start. I kind of was forced because I was unsuccessful with Gotcha several times, and I really needed and wanted to make my idea happen. So I tried, and I got the ERC for the first try. So I can't actually really say how long it took me because it was reused the Gotcha, which I spent several months writing. But then actually 4 months I was transforming that to the final state of the ERC.
Maybe Michal can add something?
Well, I think I was thinking about the project for quite some time, and it became bigger and bigger. And by being bigger, it also means that ERC looked like funding that corresponds to the idea in terms of ambition, but also in terms of funding. And I was working for it for about 2 years, very slowly. Organized a workshop, did some preparation, and then I wrote it very quickly within, I think, 2 or 3 months.
Anybody wants to add something?
Maybe for us, ERC was less bureaucratic compared to national standards. It looks strange, I know, but then after first interaction with ERC committee, they were very supportive and helpful, and really it helped the ideas to grow further.
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up question for that. What are the biggest challenges when creating a proposal? And there is the possible identification of a research idea, excellence history, administration. So I guess the administration part was answered right now. But what were the biggest challenges for you when creating the ERC proposal on whichever level you could think of?
I would say to get started, the beginning is always the most difficult step. But then when you are in and you recognize your partners, you interacted with them, and as I already said, we found very supportive from ERC committee to focus on the main objective. What is the target? What is the real basic behind of the project? It's not project for project. There is some end objectives, and we can prove these basics, and they were very supportive with the administration to help us to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Strakoš and Mr. Tomáš are both part of the expert groups to support ERC applicants. Do you have something to add in terms of what to get prepared when you want to ask for an ERC grant? What would you advise to the applicants?
Start early. ERC is a program. That means that something what you like to really do, like Kateřina said. Yeah, I like to my idea to appear, and so the idea that is worth and can survive a competition on the world scale doesn't grow over the weekend. So that means start early, just keep it in your head for quite a while and have a look what the ERC is, because it makes no sense to write an ERC grant without knowing what the ERC is. And so that's the main thing.
Some people sometimes mention that the writing a proposal for ERC is quite different from writing, for example, a proposal for Gacher. So what are the main differences, Mr. Tomáš?
Well, I've never written a Gacher grant, so that's maybe not exactly, the right person to ask. But I would say that for the proposal, I mean, the most, of course, ERC will always say, and it's true that the most important thing is the idea, to have a good idea. But I think that very important also is that your idea should be simple enough, that it is kind of explainable in a straightforward way, right? So I think for the ERC grant, the absolute key is to keep things simple. There is a very strong tendency for many people to overwhelm with a repertoire of techniques and technologies and ideas which one can throw in some direction. But what the panels are actually looking for is a clear-cut story which they can understand.
If I add a word, we have heard it here before. ERC is about the risk. You may have noticed that Maria Leptin says about 80% did some substantial result. That means this 20% perhaps doesn't. That means ERC willingly, the whole scheme is taking a risk. We are going to finance some projects. Maybe some of them will not deliver, but who cares, because the others will do. And that means that they will really bring something very substantial which goes behind the scene, behind the horizon, behind what we know, and we'll have a substantial leap forward. And that's the biggest difference, because what we do here in this country, just keep promises that leads to nowhere. This is the biggest mistake, and that's when we are working with the ERC, potential ERC applicants, we are telling them, forget about Czech system, because you will not get anywhere with that, with the ERC.
Maybe some of our grantees could second that.
I could, although I wanted to go in slightly different direction, but perhaps it connects, and that's from my experience. I mean, since I received my ERC grant, I've also been advising a couple of applicants, and I think we all have probably. And what I see very often is the idea that you just learn how to do that there's a certain technology of applying how you write your application properly. And if you have seen 3 or 4 or 5 successful ERC projects, part A and part B, B1 and B2, you will be successful. And that's not how it is. And that's, I think, the very important thing. And that's also the difference to, I think, the usual grant applications that we are all writing. And perhaps if I should add one more thing, and I think that's what's very specific about the ERC, is, in our Gacher applications, we're taking ourselves out of the equation a little bit in the project proposal. And in ERC, the principal investigator is essential. So you need to match the text and the other way around.
I would just like to add that what we like on ERC is more freedom compared to national standards. Working with national agencies, you expect to have form for everything. You expect to have templates, everything, and suddenly in ERC you are missing that. Yeah, it's up to you to propose something, not with everything. You have some ideas how this should look like, but you don't have to follow the exact structure. And if you focus on the content, yeah, then you can easily work with that structure in communication with the ERC committee that can accept your way of thinking, focusing on the core of the activity. And I think this is the biggest difference to national grants.
If I add a little bit, link it to what Pavel Tomášek has said before, clarity is absolutely important within the ERC. But the clarity, this is not only a thing how to write things. If you are able to communicate your idea with a full clarity, it affects your way of thinking. And the ERC is a program about nurturing leaders of European science. That's how it was born. And that means if you are really trying to prepare a good ERC grant, if you do it, and if it is really clear, it will affect your work in the future, independently whether you got the grant or not.
Yeah. Thank you. I would like just to add that Zdeněk Strakoš is one of the really top people to talk about this, because he served as a chair of an evaluation panel in the early years after the ERC got established. So he really knows what he's talking about. So maybe you can also tell us a little bit, how did you become the ERC panel member and later a panel chair?
That's a simple answer, I don't know. I simply got a letter from Brussels and I got scared and didn't reply for a week. I was really just looking at, and then I very cautiously wrote, well, I'm really not sure whether I will be able to do this work, because I was afraid that I'll just do the shame, not only to me, but to my country as well. And then I just got, the contract, and that was it. So, and then when I appeared in Brussels for the first time, and it was actually the very first call for advanced grants, 2007 and 2008. And then we asked these poor people who gathered there for this first interview on how to do the work. So we asked, so how did we appear here? And they didn't tell us. They just told us, well, we just look for some people who are able to look at the originality. So that's it. That's how I appeared. How I appeared the panel chair, I don't know. I was a member of the panel for 3 times. That means for 6 years. And then the panel has reshuffled a little bit. Simply, I was named the panel chair. So that's how it happened. And it was really very, very tough work, I have to say. And at the same time, it was very nice work, because you met the culture of clarity, or culture of critical discussion, culture of fights, but for the think, not for the egos. And that was very beautiful, very nice. I think Pavel Tomášek can confirm that with his experience.
I can just add, I was on the panel, actually I can make it now basically public last year, and it was the first time for me, and it's a fantastic experience. And in fact, I think it's extremely important that the people who are participating in the help to the applicants from Czech Republic, that they have this kind of experience, which is basically to say that the people who have been on the panels, I would say it's almost their patriotic duty to serve on our committee and to help the next generation of the people for the panels for which they don't have the conflict of interest, of course, right? Because this experience is really invaluable, and we must use everyone who has this experience.
Thank you very much. We will link it with a question from somebody from the public concerning the successful proposal. is it the good idea, excellent research enough, or is it important to have an administrator, manager support to be able to write a successful ERC? I think we mentioned that the idea is really crucial, but is it important or necessary, let's say, to have an administrator or support?
Nobody will write the ERC grant for you, and if he or she will do it, this will not work because you will have to do the work then afterwards, okay? So the ERC, writing ERC grant is kind of a struggle. It's really a lot of work, but very interesting work. And of course it is not just done when you have an idea and this idea is not clearly reported or it's not feasible. That means it's just, if you are asked, if you're just saying that you'll build up the perpetual motion machine, simply the idea is not good because it cannot happen. So the idea is not enough. As in life, you may have an idea, but you must also work.
Have you used some support or some advice, Kateřina, Michal, Tomáš?
I didn't use anyone for writing, but of course I have got the financial manager to help me now with the finances and with all the checks of the grants. But for the writing, it's super easy. Like the budget is done in few minutes, I would say. But the idea is the core, and this is my idea. No one can help me.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't have any support in the process of writing, apart from a few colleagues who read the proposal at some stages. But I don't think this was very decisive. And I did consult at the technology center at one moment, which was more important for me to get closer to the ethos of ERC. There was a very early moment of my project proposal writing. So I think in terms of administrative support, I can imagine that I would profit from more professional environment, but not necessarily one which would help me write the budget, but more conceptualizing the project proposal, having a better environment for discussing it. In terms of implementation and administrative support, that's of course another question, and I think it's an uphill struggle for a lot of us. Let me stop here.
I would say every organization needs good administrator and good administrative team internally to work on the proposal. Regarding to external administration, we didn't need any special support, but the core, and I think I already mentioned this, was for us communication with ERC committee, and here I should thank to Technology Center that help us to point to the right people in the ERC. I think this was very critical to get the best communication with ERC to understand the objective and then focus on our ideas, as was also mentioned by my colleagues here.
Thank you. What kind of assistant would have you used if it was accessible at the time? Is that some kind of assistance that you would find really handful, but you couldn't use it because they were non-existent at the time? If you just shake your hand, no, it's fine. Okay, good. That's also good on one hand. Did you have a chance to speak with other ERC grantees from other countries and compare your experience with the process? No.
I haven't, and I haven't seen any successful ERC grant, or unsuccessful either, which I think a lot of people want to have before they apply.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strakoš, did you expect that the ERC would become such a beacon of European research?
I have to answer yes, because when I became involved in that was in the time that was no awareness here about ERC at all, and I have tried to raise that immediately, but I was not successful. Hardly anyone listened. And sometimes there were even hostile comments on that. So we have then tried to build up a group of people who would like to be of help. We were just total volunteers lost in the middle of dark. And, but it was very clear at that time that it will be a kind of disaster, that if we'll not start to do something and build up a friendly environment, we will totally outperform. This can be also documented because this raising awareness, I wrote even articles into Lidové noviny and things like that with the help of other people, Martin Rychlík and the other people. And but that was very difficult because the start simply somehow the environment was not ready.
Mr. Tomášek.
Maybe I can maybe add to that. So you know, I applied for the very first ERC call. It was insanely competitive. There were 9,000 applications for 250 grants, and I didn't get one. But you know, already then I thought this is something very special, right? Because it was established. You know, it was an initiative which was coming from the scientists. It was driven by Fotis Kafatos, the Director General of EMBL, former. And it was really, you know, something where the rhetorics of what the funding is about was diametrically different to what you would hear from everywhere else. And the only funding agency it was actually remotely comparable to was the Human Frontier Science Program, which, you know, every scientist will tell you this is the best funding you can ever get because it's no strings attached and they leave you to do whatever the hell you want. So ERC, of course, doesn't have exactly, you know, that level of the freedom, but it has in the same spirit. And so from the very beginning, it was clear to me that if it survives, you know, it will be something which will transform European research as it did.
Do you think, or do you see that the evaluation system has changed throughout the years?
Yes, it does. You know, in general, when the ERC looks for something that is very hard to resolve, it's not clear where the applicant will go, because there might be some crossing in the year and then the original hypothesis would not be doable, the work according to that. So it's very difficult to evaluate originality. And, but the ERC used the methodology that is based on critical discussion. And discussion means not just averaging of opinions, but of confrontation of arguments that are behind the opinions. And it really learned from mistakes. So the system was kind of smooth in the sense that it goes into the direction that say eliminated the parts that are causing troubles. This process is not at the end, it just continues. And now it was anticipated that ERC has announced actually that it will change again the evaluation, that it will more emphasize the project over the PI, which is good for us essentially, because our parts definitely are different than the parts in the more developed countries scientifically. And also that it will be much better way how the person can explain the way towards the ERC grant. There will be much more narrative, which again is good in our direction because we would be able to explain better. And so ERC is learning from, say, mistakes or something that makes obstacles in fairness of evaluation. It does, really. I can give more examples, but it's no time for that. So that's also what I like on the ERC. But what I have to say, it's not at the end of the process. Mistakes are even within ERC. They do happen. But they really instantly try to work on improvement. And as far as I know, I don't know any better way of evaluating research grants than within the ERC.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. what do you find unique? We already touched it briefly, but more in depth. What do you find unique about the ERC Research Fund programs in comparison to science funded by other programs? If you have the comparison. You can start and then all of you, I think, have something to tell.
So for me is the risk.
Yeah.
The risk is the core of the ERC idea, of the whole program. We do accept the risk. They mean that we accept the fact that some part of the proposal will simply not deliver for the sake of the others who will do. And this is the only way how to say achieve the breakthroughs. So that's, I think, that's the biggest difference that we have. That's also, as I've said before, the biggest difference from our national system that plays safe, just plan deliverables. But ERC was born from the fact that the same mistake was done within Europe. At the beginning, remember, there was one big award that was celebrated. This Descartes Prize was given in Prague, actually. It was people from the EU were coming, and it was in the Spanish hall of the Prague Castle at that time. And the guy who got this with his team, so he then held a speech afterwards. He was from Sweden. And he said, you know, if you wish to do something for European science, forget about these deliverables. And that's exactly how the ERC was born.
Thank you for that. Maybe Kateřina could.
Maybe for me, it was the place where I, for the first time, felt like I'm not a judge for being a woman in science. I didn't have the feeling when I was preparing the proposal, because I was told that no one will care about it. And then at the interview, it was like awesome because it was in-person experience where I was able to talk about the project, and it was just so nice experience. And also during the project, then when I unexpectedly got pregnant and expected another child in the project, everyone was like super helpful. They offered me the solution, 1-year extension for the child. It was like unthinkable in other competitions where I was taking the part before. So this aspect was for me personally very helpful.
I think I'll echo this in different words and not new words, and that's I think what has been formulated as risk, I would say, is also trust. Once you receive the project, you're being trusted to be the expert, to make the right decisions. So the supervision is way more flexible, and it's not about the bibliometry that we see in Czech science that has been already mentioned here earlier. So I think that is very important for anyone. It was I remember that when I was starting the project, and I think Kateřina was there as well. We were to Brussels to a PI-centric event, and the very atmosphere of ERC trusting their principal investigators was something which made really a big impression on me.
I would say you took the word from me that I wanted to add as well, because the key word is really trust. You feel the risk, but the trust that you will succeed. So you are not feeling as to be in front of someone who thinks that you are suspicious, that you do only project for project, you want to get just money to enjoy your work without any results. No, absolutely not. There is really trust that you are the right person to get what you promise and what you get, and there is very high motivation for us to work in this environment.
And if I can please add one more sentence, and it's obviously when you receive an ERC grant, your position improves generally. You're way better recognized, and that is something that I think starts to work in the Czech Republic, in the scientific system as well.
I just wanted to mention maybe that it sounds like, I mean, the good thing about ERC is that you don't have to promise what you deliver. Definitely not numbers of publications, as we heard. But the accountability is built in the system, right? If you get a starting ERC grant and in 5 years you don't really deliver anything of note, right, then you will not get a consolidator. And if you have a consolidator and you don't deliver, you will not get an advanced grant, right? So they have a system how to account for the productivity, but it's much more reasonable. The other thing I wanted to say was very positive about it, which is now gone in the pandemic, was the fact that, I mean, first of all, the whole process, I mean, everybody takes it very seriously. You discuss it with lots of people, you give your proposal to other people, you get feedback. There are these organizations which help you prepare for the interviews. And you go to the interviews. Sometimes at the end of all that, you end up empty-handed, right? But for example, you know, when you are at the interviews in Brussels, you meet 3 other people. You meet 3 other applicants who are in the exact same situation as you are on the same panel. You know, yeah, when I was there, we went for dinner afterwards, and we, you know, forged a scientific relationship, right? So you get something out of it, right? By it being, you know, actually at some level very personal, right? And this is actually also quite different from other funding agencies which typically do not do that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's answer the core question, the title of this discussion. It was already touched by Matyáš, Fendrych, Michal mentioned it also too. So how can the Czech Republic become more successful in ERC competitions? Who wants to start? So maybe Mr. Tomáš.
Well, I have something prepared, but okay. But anyway, so you know, first of all, you know, can we congratulate ourselves? Are we successful? I don't have exact numbers for that, but I've been tweeting about it a lot, right? So the worst way of putting it is to say that in any given year, Switzerland, Israel, and UK gets 50 times more ERC grants than the whole Visegrad 4 group. In terms of population, we are almost equal. In terms of GDP, they are higher, right? But the difference is 50-fold. Think about that. For 1 grant, the Visegrad 4 get Israel, Switzerland, and UK used to get 50 grants. They are not part of the European Union, by the way, right? Okay, so that's really the worst way of saying it. Now I will put it down to a microcosm of the institutions which I have experience with, which is the Max Planck Institute and CETEC. And this is really, also the numbers, you know, are not completely precise, but I was checking them. So if we compare a Max Planck Institute, one of the Max Planck Institutes in Dresden and CETEC in Brno, we have comparable institution, 30 research groups if we count CETEC only as the Masaryk University. If it's a consortium, CETEC is about twice as big as the Max Planck we are talking about. Now CETEC is one of the most successful institutions in Czech Republic in getting ERC grants. And on the level of the consortium, we got 7. And on the level of the Masaryk University partner, we got 4, right? So that's about 13% of the groups which are, you know, at the institution have an ERC grant. At Max Planck, I don't have the exact number, but I think it's about 80%. So 80%. So the difference is 5-fold. This is better than 50, right? But the difference is absolutely there. Now, at CETEC, you know, we have mostly starting grants. We have 1 consolidator and no advanced. How is it at the Max Planck? Max Planck gets few starters, but usually in the later years of the career, the people who can get advanced usually have it, but not all, right? And so the Max Planck is primarily getting the consolidators, the consolidator ERC grants. Among the senior people, I mentioned, you know, at Max Planck, it would be 5 to 7 people are considered senior scientists, and if they applied, you know, sometimes not the first time around, but usually they have it. So they have an advanced grant, right? At CETEC, you know, 50% of the people will be considered senior scientists, and none of them have an advanced grant, right? So there is a difference there. So why is it, right? So the question now is really, why is Max Planck so good at building consolidators, right? Why? So I have some answers here, and I will just go through them very quickly, right? Of course, institutional funding. The institutional funding of a junior Max Planck group is on the ERC level. That's what people get when they get the job, right? In fact, at Cetec we have institutional funding, but it's 5 times less than what is at Max Planck. So 5 times. Remember, we have 5 times less ERC grants. So it could be that it's really about money, right? But I would like to argue that it's not, right? The second thing is, we are talking about building up consolidators, building up people who are then competitive for getting an ERC grant within the institution. So what are the differences between Max Planck and Cetec, right? Or I should say that Cetec is an example where things work relatively differently compared to other places in Czech Republic. So it's a little bit unfair comparison, but nevertheless I will do it. So research evaluation. People get always extremely shocked when I tell them that for Max Planck, a research group in their first 5 years of existence is expected to generate 1 to 1.3 publications of note. So 1 to 1.3 means 1 or 2, but more likely 1 than 2, right? It doesn't mean that they don't publish 5, 6 papers in those 5 years, or maybe even 10, right? But we are expecting from them 1 publication which defines them, which is their discovery, right? And think about how research is evaluated in Czech Republic. It is all about numbers and quantities. At Max Planck, the researchers are evaluated by an international scientific advisory board, which decides, whether the publications they are presenting, whether they are good enough to define them, whether that they achieve this 1 to 1.3 publication. And at Cetec we are doing that by the way too, right? The third thing I wanted to mention is that there's incredible amount of networking accessible at Max Planck. People come, they start their research group. Basically, nobody knows about them, and within 1 or 2 years, they are already giving presentations at the major international meetings, and they are organizing meetings themselves. They are running courses. They are all over the scientific community. So that's, clearly, we are benefiting from the visibility of Max Planck, but this is something we can influence and something which we can do in Czech Republic. We can do good, promotion, networking, PR. We can do it, right? We can catch up on that. We're getting to the end. Sorry, it's a little bit wrong, right? The other thing which is really unique about the Max Planck system is that it's, of course, because the structure is such that only a very small number of people are permanent, so it's an incubator turnover of research talent. But in order to do that, you need to have a room to grow. You need to have a place where you can send those people. And in fact, that works fantastically for the city of Dresden, because 60% of the people who are, graduating from the Max Planck incubator, who run an independent research group for 9 years, they end up in Dresden at a full-scale professorship. And the rest spreads around Germany, around Europe, and some people go to the US or Asia, right? So the market, the expansion is to the entire world, but majority is in the city, right? So, we need to work with institutions where the academic absorption and industrial absorption of the city is such, that people can actually, graduate from such system. With such system, with the turnover, you obviously have the age structure, which I kind of mentioned. And here I get to the most important point, which I wanted to make, actually, right? So how comes that MPI is so good at building the consolidator? Because it has the institutional culture of doing that. The seniors are taking it as their, primary job to build up the juniors, to help them, to educate them, to challenge them day in and day out on their research questions. So when these people come to an ERC interview, it's easy for them because they have been going through it for 3 years. They've been at the ERC panel, twice a year, every year in their home institution during discussions which they regularly have about their science, right? And it's extremely collegial, it's among friends, but it's challenging and it's scientific. And it's something, you know, which I have experienced firsthand, and it's something which is irreplaceable, right? And so, in fact, this is something we can totally do, right? We have a lot of seniors, we have junior people, and so we have absolutely an opportunity to build in our institutions cultures which will generate ERC consolidators. And, you know, in my opinion, no matter what we do, this is the way, is to come from bottom up, from the institution, and we have to build those people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This was exhausting and very exhaustive, sorry. I am exhausted. Okay, so has anyone of you something to add to the question, how can the Czech Republic become more successful in ERC competition? Because this was very full-bodied.
No, I'm happy to continue, and in a way less sophisticated way than Pavel did. But I think it connects. So I thought what I would highlight is that so far there's been some success in advertising ERC and making clear to potential applicants how you do that, what you need to do, and to build up this support system here. What, however, is the bigger question going forward is the broader environment for not only for the grants but for the principal investigators, and that I think it connects very very nicely. So I think for me it's also a question for me. I'm thinking about what's going to happen in 2 years. When my project is over, the funding is over, and I'm in a very small institute that hardly can support the same, even if they want it, right? If they were, completely open, it would be very difficult in terms of resources to support this kind of work going forward. And of course, I can remember when I received the ERC grant. And it was a year when I was in Vienna, actually, and I talked to a couple of colleagues from Germany, Austria, and they typically say, now you go somewhere and negotiate a permanent position with some conditions. And I didn't do that because I felt this is a project that belongs to Prague. But of course, it's coming back to me at this moment. And I think that there should be more discussion about how to build on the momentum that is created through ERC projects, to sustain the internationalization that comes with that, to help the institutions to sustain the teams that are international, to allow the same kind of networking, conferencing activity going forward. And I think it's going to be a challenge. I think it goes in two directions. The more specific is that in my view, it would be good to really think about what kind of targeted support, by which I mean funding, could be used for that, for institutions that actually have their ERC projects. And the other is, it cannot be disconnected from the fact that Czech science, although it improved, is underfinanced, and it's chronically underfinanced. And from the fact that the ERC funding also creates inequality. Let's face it. It creates inequalities in our institutions that it doesn't create in Max Planck, not in the same way, or not at...
But in Germany, it does. Yeah. In Germany, it does.
It does, but not on the same level as here. And although I think this scientific environment in the Czech Republic has been improving, so I can see it at the Academy of Sciences. I still think that, but also in the current economic situation, I think it will go back a little bit. So I think it will be a big challenge. And if I would add one more sentence to that, I think it's going to be a particular challenge for the humanities. It appears to me that for reasons, again, I think partially reasons of institutional ethos, but that is the individualism of work, but partially also because of the underfinancing, humanities have that way more difficult than the sciences.
Anybody else?
A couple of points were highlighted by Matyáš's presentation at the end of his presentation. But to add this, I think generally the awareness of ERC in Czech universities and institutions is relatively low. And there is some natural skepticism based on national project grants, that people are thinking how much of the effort is needed for administration and bureaucracy. And if we go to upper level, to European, to compete with everyone, it will be much worse. So it will have a lot of requirements and resources, and this is too risky to try. So one of the answers is to work on awareness what ERC really is, and that the stress and highlights is on the idea and the proof of the idea. And when you pass the necessary criteria, let's say, the level of trust and motivation is much higher.
Yeah, I would only maybe highlight the departmental culture as such, as it was already said, because I can see it on our department, like where the head of the institute says that who doesn't have the ERC will be seen as a problematic person. So we are generally trying, and there is like always many applications going to the ERC. We have got, and also in myself, I felt like I'm exhausted after the first one and I will not submit another one, but now my colleague got one. And I go, no, it can't be the laboratory in my department that got ERC and I don't have it. So of course I will be trying the next one again in 2 years. So this is just building up that it's very normal to apply for ERC outside of the national competitions.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, we have a row of questions in the Slido, so we will go through those. The first one is there from morning. Sorry for waiting. ERC grants budget according to national wages or EU average. For example, the wages in Germany are 3 times higher than in the Czech Republic, so planned project size differs significantly. It's not really a question, or is it a question? So what do you think about that? Probably Mr. Tomáš or
it's
Mr.
remarkable.
Strakoš.
It's remarkable. Basically, I mean, that's what, the ERC Council should hear. It's like the ERC grants here mean much more than they mean in Switzerland or England or Germany, right? They mean much, much more. Yeah. I mean, which is, of course, it also provides freedom. I mean, people should be paid, extremely highly educated, talented people should be paid according to their education, right? And ERC gives the opportunity to do that. But even if you adjust, even if you pay people more than is usual, right? You still, can create, probably, double the amount of positions than you can in Switzerland from one ERC grant.
Mm-hmm.
Just one point. It's to me quite surprising that sometimes this discussion leads to the questions like that, because it's clearly advantages for us. And just to say one word, ERC is going towards the lump sum funding. That means there'll be no reporting whatsoever, essentially, in the future for what you just complete trust in your thing. So just compare it with other things system, and I think that's it. So it's better to talk about science, I think.
Yeah. We stay at finances. There is a question: would you prefer ERC based on reporting real costs, current situation, or based on lump sum amount paid after competition task, regardless real costs in the future?
I'll say something. I think lump sum is obviously an advantage, but it depends of how detailed the proposal would have to be. Because it's connected, you have to do, typically with lump sum, you have to do more work in advance and less work later. So I would need to see what it really will mean for ERC at proposal time.
It would be really wonderful if ERC manages to somehow get rid of the timesheets. Because they are the the European Commission version of science fiction.
Well, but the auditors don't, I think.
Yeah, but I have no connection to reality.
They have the power, though.
Now we have a discussion. Okay. Anya Bunzel asks if it's possible to arrange a private meeting with successful ERC applicant from arts, humanities, social sciences sector. Michal.
I typically say yes when people approach me.
All right, so there is your answer. Contact Michal, please.
May I add a comment?
Yes.
Actually, the system of workshops that we do have ERC applicants, successful ERC applicants. We do have workshops where the people are looking at the successful grant and they have a direct discussion, they have to evaluate, etc. So this system does exist. And that was commented on by the Maria Leptin, by the way, at the end of her speech. So this does exist. And the whole information about this can be found on the Technology Center website. And it's related to the work of this of the expert group where Pavel Tomáš and myself serve behind, and also many other people, actually.
Yeah, I am really glad that you mentioned this because there is another question exactly to the expert system supporting the ERC applicants, how it works exactly. So maybe you can close up a little. Yeah, I know that he just answered it, but maybe you have something more to add?
Well, I mean, I think that it is a really great system. I mean, you know, Zedníček deserves total recognition for setting it up and running it. And it's something which, you know, Maria said in her presentation that that the ERC CZ is a great thing. I totally agree with that. That's a big success of Czech Republic. But the preparation system for the ERC, you know, this is another big thing. I mean, there are some countries who do that, but the system which Zedníček has set up is completely driven by scientists, and it's for scientists. And it's, you know, even though the impact of it may not be felt, you know, so strongly yet, you know, it will be impactful. I mean, there are definitely success stories, people who have went through this preparation, and I can see, you know, that the people are coming back to it, right? That's the indication that they get some benefits from it, and I think it will, in the long run, really, you know, change the equation here.
Thank you. Other questions goes back to the interviews in Brussels that Michal and Kateřina mentioned. How often have you trained for that? And would you recommend more trainings in advance, and could this raise the success rate? Both of you.
I trained like 100 times. It was non-stop hell for several weeks in front of different people. I went to Prague to my colleagues to practice, then I changed the presentation back to Budějovice, then online again training with some people. Yeah, I spent lots of time on it.
Yeah, I think I did it the same. I had the mock interview here in Prague at the Technology Institute. I remember Zdeněk's comments. and of course that was helpful. I did another mock interview in Vienna with colleagues. And although their questions were completely different from what would later come in the real interview, it still was helpful. And I think it's a strategic thinking about how to help people to prepare for this kind of pressure cooker situation that at least what I've seen, I mean, you mentioned the friendly beer with people whom you have met, but I've seen a bunch of very nervous, extremely nervous people in the room. let me put it this way, and I don't. I'm really sorry that I don't remember their names, and I can't check if they received the project. But with some, I would be very skeptical, not because of their scientific level, quality, but rather because of how nervous they were in Brussels. And I don't know what the answer is to the question whether this system is right or not. But perhaps it's something to think for the ERC also to think about. And it's not just about the length of the interview and the setup, but the basic system, how it works, that you come in, there's no time to prepare, you don't know who's in front of you. So all of that, I think, might work for some people, perhaps for me, but might be worse for other people.
And maybe a comment. First, now the system, and it looks like it will stay that way, that the ERC panels are meeting in Brussels, but interviews will stay online, so they will not be. The reason why there's an interview, the main reason is that they would like to give the chance the applicants to answer to some points that arose in the reports. And so that the feeling is that can make the whole process more fair. And I think this is a good principle. Even in some cases can make it difficult, but this general rule I think is healthy.
Yeah, I think I was not questioning the value of the interview itself, but rather its setup and the way how it affects certain people.
Yeah, I know, but the setup now will be person is sitting in his institution at home, and the panel is sitting in Brussels.
I don't know.
So I completely agree with you. I was an absolute nervous wreck when I did my starting ERC interview, and I only became relaxed when it was actually over. The presentation, Q&A was very, very easy. But even though I practiced it, I had it like completely burned in my brain. I stutter, so I just, of course, it showed up, right? So yeah, it is very, very tough. But the committees, very little is given. I think minimum, I think, is given to appearance. Yeah. What I find amazing is that people are able to deliver these talks, within like plus minus 5 seconds of the allotted time. That is very impressive.
I think it's very normal to be nervous at any interview. That is important. But I think that you all answered the question, so train if you want to be successful at the interview for ERC. What kind of funding next after ERC? Kateřina, Michal, Tomáš. Another ERC?
Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize, yes. We don't have many Nobel Prize in this.
Breakthrough Prize.
So,
I think for us it was clear. We were, in fact, because we already closed our ERC in 2020, we're in fact a sort of offer to continue and apply for EIC as a continuation to the Innovation Council competition that we also successfully passed, and it is now running since autumn, so which is an automatic continuation towards really industrialization and commercialization of the idea that we have with some practical outputs.
I think that's the difficult question, right? Because there's nothing like the ERC.
Another ERC.
And of course, I'll be eyeing the advanced as a possibility, but there's a long way towards that. What I'm thinking about is proof of concept that is way more challenging for a project in the humanities. And there's not that many precedents, as I've understood. But it's equally important to translate our findings to, say, education or other areas as well. So I think that will be my most immediate thinking, what comes after.
I will continue with another ERC.
Good.
May I add a little point? Yes, and we have examples of ERC grantees that got consolidated after starting immediately. Also in humanities, David Kosař, Filip Matějka, for example. So good luck with that. But I think that goes back to this principle. ERC is about nurturing leaders of the science. So it's kind of responsibility of the local environment to keep these leaders to grow. So it's responsibility, I think, of the local and also global system that would allow some options for them to stay and not just to be say, left alone just on the grant funding. I mean, this is not the healthy scheme.
Thank you. There is another question. It was mentioned already that knowledge of what ERC is and isn't is important. How can such awareness, especially among management of our institutions, be improved?
Okay, that's a question for me, I guess. So the whole system that we have created starts with so-called National Information Day that is organized by Technology Center together with the expert group. It takes place typically in November, so it was in November. It's on a web page. You can look all the presentations that were there. The last year it was done together with the European Commission, essentially with the ERC itself. So it was an official event of the ERC, and you can find it also on the webpage of the ERC in Brussels with all the presentations. And then we explain what is ERC, what is the system of evaluation, what kind of schemes, etc., how all does it work. So that's the first thing. As for the institutions, on Thursday, this Thursdays, we do have another workshop for that is intentional, because the National Information Day is both for, say, responsible officers of the institutions, say, project managers, and potential applicants, okay? Then this workshop that we'll have on Thursday is just for project managers, that we explain to them what we need the institutions to do to prepare the ERC grantees in order to enter our system of preparation that consists of 3 consecutive workshops. Consecutive doesn't mean week by week, but that go around the whole year, okay? So this will take it on Thursday. I'm not sure whether it is still open, the registration, but it will be online. Yes. And so this is really an instruction, so what to do, and again, we'll talk shortly how the potential applicant that wish to apply in the given year should look like in order to enter the workshops, because these workshops that we organized are not intended for someone who maybe will apply in 10 years or 5 years. It's intended for people who are writing already, who are ready to apply in the next work program, okay? Otherwise it doesn't make sense. But for that we need these people to be ready. So we explain in detail what does it mean to be ready on Thursday, okay? And then there's a system of workshops. First will be in May, then in June, and the last one in September, and then mock interviews afterwards. I think all of the people who are here have attended this mock interview at the end at least. And so that's how it works. But the system of workshops can be entered only through the first workshop. So it's impossible, because it's not like that we repeat the same thing. It's really a system that is well thought. And so that's why we need these people to be prepared, and we explain what does it mean to be prepared on Thursday.
Thank you. We have one more comment in Slido that probably comments on the presentation of Matyáš Fendrych. It's the operational program YAG that he mentioned. Publications are only one criteria, also to be realistic and reasonable. Team and research quality, cooperation, interdisciplinarity, etc. have more weight. So I guess this is just a comment, or if it was a question, then I would ask for you to probably frame it or like write it again. Thank you. And we have, let's say, one last question for all of you to close up. If you had a chance to change one thing in Czech research system, what would it be? Just one, you can think for a moment. And Zdeněk Strakoš could start, yes.
Okay, so I'll start. It's very, very hard question, because, you know, just start, I'll say then, but just a little comment on, you know, the ERC story, what Pavel, the numbers said, shows that our system is not healthy, because we are not showing these people outside of this country the quality of our research. And we do much, much better than these numbers show. We do have talents. We are not less talented than the rest of the world. We do have them, but we simply don't care for them properly. So that's the issue. So the system doesn't work well. And now what to do? So I think create an atmosphere, environment of critical discussion. Critical, I means to be challenging but helpful at the same time, and in this way to support the initiative of those people who are able to, say, take the responsibility for leading the others. That's the only way how the science can grow. Science cannot be planned ahead. Science is based on the initiative of individuals. And some of the individuals are simply able more, are capable more to lead the others than the others. Then again, we are again back to the ERC. So what I would say, if there is one thing to formulate it in one word, just use the spirit of ERC to transform our system. Spirit, not to copy ERC. We cannot copy ERC.
Spirit, yes. Kateřina, what would you change if you had the chance?
It's for me very difficult question also, but I feel that I would need some kind of change which would not be focusing into those small pools where the people are like kind of stuck and living, because like when the national competition for the grant sometimes to me feels that it doesn't make sense at all, because it's not focused on the idea, but it's given to the people who are already like the group of people who are getting that all the time, and there's no kind of way to get into. And from my personal experience, just like exactly the same project just submitted under the name of different people, a person can have absolutely different evaluation, where that just doesn't work as on the merit of the science as such, but more on the merit of the people.
Yeah, thank you. Michal, the question was if there was one thing you can change in the Czech research system, what would it be?
Okay, I think we've said a lot of things, and I'm not going to repeat them, although they're perhaps more important, but I think I would advance transnational funding, not necessarily as ERC, but combined funding from more countries, 2 or 3. We do have them, but it's very inflexible. But I think it might be a way to get out of these little clusters where we all know everything and know everyone and know how things work. And it might make it easier for people to think about, the ERC way. Let's put it this way.
Okay, if I can have two things. I would have comment to the whole education system. One thing that I consider important for us is to insist on a logical way of education and logical thinking. It can be very painful for brain, to train the logical way of thinking, but it's advantage of Europe compared to Asia, compared to US, especially our zone of Czech and German territory. So really logical way of thinking is one of the things that can bring us competitiveness to the other regions globally. And secondly, it can be contrary. Sorry, you are from humanistic, I know, but it's not contrary. But the second thing, together with this, is try to modify this education system to support creativeness and imagination. I think this is really missing to support from grammar, high school up to the university level. And when we model the behavior of some unusual people, genius people like Albert Einstein or Walt Disney or whoever, what is the common? What makes these people unique and outstanding from the crowd? And the conclusion was it's imagination. They were capable of very high imaginative way of thinking. And I'm afraid that our education system is not supporting enough this way of creativity and imagination.
Super surprising what I'm going to say. I think that somehow we should probably try to find a way to transform some of the more complex and baroque ways how we try to support science in this country into something a little bit more streamlined, like institutional funding. And I don't really I'm not an economist to figure out, how to do that, but I think we are wasting a lot of resources on the side of the administrators who are fighting these wars between the institutions and the ministries about the deliverables and the objectives of the grants, and we are really tiring the researchers out, right? I mean, you could see that with Matyáš, that people are really kind of sick of it, right? So if there is a way how to transform, that resources into a more direct institutional funding, I think we would be better off. But I know it's hard. The other thing I would say, if I may, second thing, this is not so much about that, for anybody who hears it, do write an ERC grant, right? Because actually in many fields, especially in the ones I am familiar with, the major problem is that people don't apply, right? And that kind of has a direct impact on how many applications a panel received, which is by a very simple mathematical formula related to how many grants are given for a given research field, right? And so the fields which are the most competitive, where people are the most afraid to apply because they assume they will not get it, they are actually making things worse by not applying. So this is something which is very, very important. Not in every field. Some fields are super oversubscribed, but in life sciences fields, please do try, because otherwise this system will actually die out.
Thank you very much. This would have been a great end to this discussion, but we have other questions coming, and since we still have time, I would like to really briefly go through those. So why have you chosen for your ERC the Czech Republic and not abroad? That's for your 3, I guess. Have you even considered applying for the ERC, like as not from the Czech Republic, as if I understand the question correctly?
I can start. Yeah, I applied from here because I already had here house and the family, and I was actually coming back from Australia, so I wanted to start here. And then after I received the ERC, I have got several offers to move somewhere, but the countries were not acceptable for me, despite it was UK, which at the time was on the way to Brexit. I was not sure what to expect, but the institution was good, so I decided to stay where I am here. Mm-hmm.
I think I've already mentioned that I was in Vienna. I was actually considering that, but I've made the decision to come back or stay here. I think for 2 reasons. One was because this is a project about East Central Europe and refugees, and I felt it would not be the best signal to, take as the first thing to take this project somewhere to the west. And the second was that I felt that things are improving here. And the Masaryk Institute, for instance, is a very small institute, and I could criticize a number of things, but it is an example of a certain advancement. So I felt it's actually a good environment, and perhaps I can support this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was not part of ERC team at the submission time, but I can guess that very important was the infrastructure. There were a group of people with knowledge and support also from other institutions to the idea that created unique local environment.
Yeah, Zedníček.
Just a little comment. 2010, I guess, we have applied for what now would be called ERC Synergy. Mm-hmm. There was a group of 4 people, 3 from the Czech Republic, 1 from Great Britain, from Oxford. And we just by little chance didn't get it, but we got an ERC-CZ. And why? So I feel just competent to answer a little bit, because we are at home here.
Yeah.
I can actually say something. So maybe going out on a limb a little bit, but I'm currently a holder of an advanced ERC grant for Germany. But I hope that I will, in the future, at least write an ERC grant here in Czech Republic, right? So let's see how that goes.
Thank you very much. There is a question about the dates of workshops, if it could be made visible, available as soon as possible so that people can put it in the calendar.
We cannot say the date exactly because we have the big group of people who are helping the applicants who are involved, so that depends. But we have decided already about the weeks, essentially, and we will reveal them on Thursday, okay? So it's in the middle of May, and then in the middle of June, and the first half of September, okay? But again, the first workshop is decisive. Those who don't enter the first workshop through the gate by submitting some materials, they will be judged, then they cannot enter the other workshop. The number of participants is limited. We cannot work with more than, say, 50 people. That's simply physically impossible. And these 50 people, if they are ready, that's fine. Typically, we start with about 50 people, and we end up with about 20 to 25 submitted ERC grants at the end of the year.
Yeah, thank you. And there is also the comment that the registration for a workshop on the 16th of February is open up to the midnight today. I don't know who wrote it, but I guess that's the good information that you needed to know. So for the workshop on the 16th, sign up till the midnight this day. And one very last question, I don't know if it's not too difficult for the end, but what is the main reason behind a proposed change of evaluation of ERC from WP 2024, joining CVs and track of record in the proposal templates? Okay,
so maybe I can comment on that a little bit. Maria Leptin here mentioned these things about widening, and was a lot about widening countries. So ERC instantly thinks about what to do with this, say, imbalanced participation. And I think goes in that direction. And part of our work that we do that is hidden to you and hidden to participants is that we do communicate with the ERC, sending them some suggestions, sending them some, say, showing them if there is something which we think might be done better. And I think that's in part mostly I think it's the result of discussions in the Scientific Council, but also in part also is a reaction to that feedback that made them to think about that. It's very helpful for us because if we will be able to explain the path of our people much better in a narrative way, it's definitely helpful for the panel, because we don't have the same, if we count the number of say, invitations to the world-class conferences, etc., etc. So the people who are sitting in Prague or in Brno or Olomouc or elsewhere cannot compete with the people who are sitting in Cambridge, Oxford, Paris, etc. Simply because you don't meet this, say, Nobel Prize winner every day. And they don't know you. It's not any willing bias, it's just the standard thing. But if you explain in a narrative way better, it may happen that these people who are sitting in Olomouc, Brno, etc., Budějovice, can be much more original than the people who are sitting in the environment that just follow the mainstream path. So it's definitely advantages. I'm very happy about it. Of course, we don't know yet how exactly it will look like, but I think it's a good move. So my understanding is that that's the reason. They just wish to make the evaluation more fair to those people who are not in the center.
Thank you for this detailed explanation, kind of an insider. And thank you all very much. Big thanks from this panel discussion goes to Zdeněk Strakoš, Kateřina Sam, Michal, Frankl, sorry, Tomáš Zedníček and Pavel Tomančák. Thank you very much for joining this conversation.
Thank you. Please do consider applying for ERC.
Yeah, apply for the ERC, everyone. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's time for coffee, and we will meet here again at 15:35. Enjoy.